Memorial Day weekend, I think it would be fitting for me to begin today's message telling a story about one of America's probably most famous Revolutionary War soldiers, but a man whose sacrifice for our country almost was forgotten, or was almost forgotten. Nathan Hale was 21 years old when he was caught by the British in the city of New York. They arrested him as a spy, and he was hung to death at that time. Hale was a graduate of Yale University. They did things different in those days. He went to Yale University. He was at age 14. Was a member of a large family. His dad was a deacon of a church and had a lot of children. I don't know how many, but a lot of children, and could only afford to educate two of them. And so he took Enoch and Nathan. Enoch was 1 year older than Nathan, and sent the two of them to go to college, and the rest of them worked on farms and all of that kind of stuff. But Hale graduated from Yale University, and by the time the Revolutionary War was begun, he was already an experienced and seasoned teacher. He had taught at two different schools in the state of Connecticut, and according to records and accounts of the people during his life, he was a real quiet, peaceful young man, athletic and kind of fun-loving, but you would have considered him to be, unassuming and quiet, and not a radical by any means. But he was a patriotic person. Remember, he's living in a day where patriotism, everyone is discussing patriotism. Revolutionary War, pre-Revolutionary War, everyone's discussing, everyone's writing and reading and talking about what should be the colonists' future relationship with England. And is it time to break that tie with England as the mother country? Was it time for that to happen? And a patriot would have been someone. There was the loyalists who were saying, no, we need to stay true to England. And the patriots would have been those who have been saying, no, it's time for us to break ties and to claim our independence and become our own country. It was time for that to happen. So at age 19, something that would have been very, very common and normal in those days, Nathan Hale joined a local, in the town that he was in, taught New London, Connecticut. He joined their local militia, and most people did. It was a matter of safety. It's how you protected yourself. It was very similar to how a small town today would have a volunteer fire department. You had to have some way to fight those fires, and you didn't have the money and the means to have a paid-for professional firefighting department. So in those small communities, even today, they have volunteer fire departments. And in those days, it was very, very normal for a community, for an area, to have a militia. It was for public safety, and you had it to protect you from Indians or from marauders, someone who came into town. It was how you protected your town. It was very, very common for a young man and actually not just young, for young and old men to join up with the local militia to protect the city. But after Lexington and Concord, Hale became pretty vocal about patriotic subjects, and when his contract with the school that he was teaching at expired, he resigned his position as a school teacher and joined the official Continental Army, and to fight alongside of the Continental Army for American independence. Shortly thereafter, he was chosen to be a part of a unique special unit at his day. It was called Norton's Rangers. And this Norton was selecting certain guys with what he considered to be the right kind of talents to put together this special team. We'd call it Special Forces today, and to put together this special team of men to do these certain assignments. And in September of 1776, Washington goes to Norton, and he says he needs to get some intelligence about what the British are planning in New York, and we need to get some intelligence from them. And so a plan was devised, and Nathan Hale volunteered for the assignment, and he rode across the waters and into the city of New York. He made himself pretended to be a Dutch school teacher, teaching some of the Dutch children there, and successfully infiltrated the community so that he could, as a teacher, so that he could gain information and pass that information on to George Washington. But he wasn't there very long. It didn't last long before some of the loyalists in New York became suspicious of him, turned him in, and he he was arrested and sentenced as a spy and executed for it. Of course, they didn't do things kind of like how we would do it today. If today, a guy gets arrested for something like that, there can be years and years and years before anything happens. That's not what you did back then. When they decided the British determined he was a spy, the sentence was carried out almost immediately. They just, in fact, they know that the name of the teenage boy, a black boy who was given the assignment to tie the rope to the tree that he was hung on, and then that boy grew up to be someone I can't remember right now, very famous in American history himself. But they just hung him right away, and there was no ceremony nor anything like that. They just take him. He's a spy, so they take him out to the tree, and they gave him just before his execution, they gave him a piece of paper, 2 pieces of paper. He wrote a letter to his commanding officer, and he wrote a letter to his mother. And then was given opportunity to say a few words and was hung to death. And because of the way it was done, it wasn't like, there were all kinds of witnesses to see it, to see his execution, and except for military personnel, not a lot of people to witness it and so forth. But there was one British officer present who gave an account of the hanging of Nathan Hale in his personal journal. He just wrote a few words. It wasn't much. He just said, that such day, such a time, Nathan Hale, young man Nathan Hale, was hung, and he conducted himself, civilly. He didn't pitch a fit. He died like a man. That kind of a thing is what he said. But another interesting thing happened. One of Nathan Hale's Yale classmates, and also a member of the Norton Rangers, a guy by the name of William Hull, under flag of truce, was given opportunity to interview the next day, the day after the execution, was given opportunity to interview the officer in charge of his hanging. Given opportunity under flag of truce, was given opportunity to interview him. And it was during that time that William Hull wrote and said, or William Hull recorded that this British officer's report was that among Nathan Hale's last words is that famous line, "I regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." Now, that's a very famous statement, that Nathan Hale was hung, that he died, that he said, "I regret that I have but one life to lose for our country," is one of the treasures of American history, isn't it? I mean, everyone knows the story. But here's an interesting thing. As famous as that statement and the sacrifice of Nathan Hale is, the story almost got forgotten. In fact, how they put it is like this. September of 1776, hundreds of Americans died. And their names are not remembered. It was not at all unusual that a young American male was killed in September of 1776. It wasn't unusual at all. George Washington never once, in anything that he wrote, never once in the rest of his life, never once mentioned the name of Nathan Hale. No record that Washington ever gave it a thought. An officer, I know that an officer in charge with that kind of troops, he's going to be thinking about the loss of men in general, but to be thinking of every single one individually, it'd be nearly an impossible task. And so there's no record that Washington really acknowledged in any other way than one of his men was lost. There's no record that he acknowledged it anything other than that. It wasn't until, in fact, the early 1900s that Nathan Hale's sacrifice and those words, his famous words, began to take on the fame that it has today. It was an American poet and school teacher in the early 1900s that began to take that and publish that story and make it what it is today. And so for 100 years or more, nobody talked about Nathan Hale. And the young man who died so very early on, 21 years old, died for the sake of our freedom and our liberty today. And so for that reason, I think Nathan Hale, because he was a young man whose sacrifice was almost forgotten, but wasn't, I think for that reason, Nathan Hale serves as kind of as a representative of all of those forgotten men and women who've lost their lives to purchase the liberty, the freedom that you and I enjoy today.